A strange creature is seen above the houses. Someone shouts what it is. It is reported that the action takes place in the Magic City, located in the kingdom of Grangai. The mother asks the crying child to run away, who screams that he is very scared. The boy has horror on his face. A monster appears in front of the mother and son. It stretches out its hand and declares that the number of races should be reduced to a minimum. The mother hugs her son. Cries for salvation are heard nearby. Something incomprehensible happens. The mother and son close their eyes. We see an outstretched hand with spread fingers. A figure in a cloak hangs in the air above the people. The villain freezes. In front of us is a blue-eyed guy. Someone calls him a great magician and Mr. Asmar. The young man raises his fist to strike. His opponent asks how dare he do this. The guy's fist is already in front of him. Apparently, the blow has already been delivered. The guy's head is shown nose down. Electric discharges sparkle above the city. In front of Asmar, there are several similar figures hanging in the air. A bright white sphere glows in a clawed hand. A huge black ball is visible above Asmar's head. The guy screams that his opponent has come to an end. We see many balls of different sizes. There is a flash. In front of us are pointy-eared characters and a ball exploding above their heads. The blonde man standing behind a star says that he succeeded. It is reported that in front of us is Kirio, a subordinate of the great magician. He declares that his boss was able to deal with the invaders, and that he is simply incredible. Asmar, smiling, says that this war with the aliens has come to an end, and humanity can breathe a sigh of relief. The guy has a smile on his face. He thanks all his companions for their contribution to the victory. The young people answer that they should thank Asmar. Their faces are hidden behind a black veil. Someone turns to Mr. Asmar. In front of us is a magnificent building. It is reported that it is in the Magic City, the capital of the kingdom of Grangai. A guy with blue hair looks at the man sitting in front of him. It is reported that a solemn ceremony is taking place in honor of the end of the war with otherworlders. The king of Grangai, whose eyes are hidden, declares that his subject is being expelled from the kingdom. The young man has indignation on his face. He asks why they are doing this to him, because it was he who saved this world. In front of us is a character in a strange headdress. He says that Asmar really saved their people from terrifying invaders from another world, namely monsters that call themselves Omega. A creature surrounded by many balls stretches out his hand forward. We again see a collapsing sphere. The previous speaker says that the hero managed, using his unique great magic, to completely destroy both the invaders and the gate from another world, and now he can be considered the savior of this world. Asmar stands before the king, who confirms that everything said is true, and the kingdom was saved thanks to the power of one man. Asmar asks why he is being exiled in this case. The king states that it is because his power is abnormal. Asmar cries. The boy stands with his hand outstretched. The king states that now that this terrible war has come to an end, there is no longer a need for the young man's enormous power, which has suddenly become dangerous. The monarch sits on the throne. He states that Asmar must disappear for the future of the Grangai kingdom. Asmar looks at someone with concern. A red liquid pours out of a glass. Someone says that the drink the hero drank earlier was a forbidden wine that seals any magic. Behind Asmar, one boy and 3 girls are visible. The hero looks at them with disdain. Kirio, who, as it turns out, is a fire mage, smiling, apologizes to the hero for the fact that they gave him something like that to drink. Earth mage Siwon says that the hero, with such power, can easily start a rebellion, and they cannot allow that. Water mage Miyun adds that his majesty is never wrong in his predictions. Air mage Isaiah declares that in order to prevent Asmar from destroying their beautiful kingdom, he will have to be killed. We see a raised hand. Its owner says goodbye and uses forbidden magic. A magical formation appears above the magnificent building that we saw earlier. We see several characters screaming in horror. It is reported that they are overtaking instant death. In front of us is the hero's right eye. Asmar thinks that the king gathered all the mages of the country in this room to cast a spell and suppressed his powers. The lower part of the young man's face is vaguely shown. The hero wonders if this was done only because in the future he could rebel against the king, and also because there will no longer be invaders who can threaten this world. What is happening seems complete nonsense to the guy. Asmar looks down. The king's eyes are hidden by a blindfold. The hero cannot understand whether his majesty's predictions are just a pretext to kill him. Bloody tears flow from Asmar's eyes. He asks how it was possible to carry out such an order from the king, even though such orders are supposedly not subject to discussion. Splashes rise up. Asmar cannot believe that all this will end like this. Above the head of the hero crying bloody tears, shards are visible, on which various characters are depicted. Asmar loudly screams that they did this to him after everything he did for this country. The hero raises his hand up and says that at least let his soul find peace in the next life. Asmar screams loudly. A magical formation is visible in front of him. People in hoods open their mouths. Asmar screams hysterically and seems to fall somewhere. The guy continues to fly head down. We see spreading waves. Gray clouds float across the sky. It is reported that after the death of the great magician, a peaceful time came and then 3,000 years passed. We see a modern building. It is reported that the action has moved to the present day. A young man is lying on a bed. He opens his eyes. The guy sits up in bed. He rubs the back of his head and asks where he is. In front of us is someone's elbow. A request to repeat what was said sounds. The hero stands with his hand on his belt. Someone asks if the patient has really regained consciousness. On the hospital bed is visible a tag with the name Shioba Asuma. The guy thoughtfully rubs his chin and says that even the name is a little similar. Behind him is a doctor who says that the young man was in a vegetative state, and there was no hope that he would come to his senses. It seems to the doctor that some kind of miracle happened. The doctor puts his hand on the guy's shoulder and tries to stop him. Asmar thoughtfully rubs his chin. He thinks that the magic of reincarnation was successful, and he can even understand the speech of those around him. The guy looks a little to the side from you. He thinks that first he needs to understand how much this world has changed. He asks those around him if they can tell him where the largest library is. The doctor and nurse look at the guy in amazement. The hero's eyes glow. The same thing happens with the girl's eyes. The nurse, as if under hypnosis, says that in order to get to the library, you need to leave the hospital, turn left and walk about 5 minutes to the station. The doctor indignantly asks why the girl is telling all this. Asmar stretches out his hand forward. He thanks the girl and asks if he sees his own things. The nurse obediently answers that these are indeed the guy's things. The doctor once again indignantly asks why the girl is telling all this. A window is visible behind the counter for things. The hero says goodbye and wishes all the best. The doctor demands to stop. He says that the patient needs to take several tests. Asmar is sitting on a blue plastic chair. He has a backpack in his hands. The young man is holding a mobile phone and asks what this strange plate is. A girl passing by, who, apparently, was asked this question, answers that it is a smartphone. Asmar looks at the device and repeats the word he just heard. The device is surrounded by a sphere of white energy. It is reported that the analysis skill is being used, related to analytical magic. Asmar looks at the smartphone. He realizes that it is some kind of magic tool that gives access to printed and video materials. The hero looks at the screen of the device and says that it is worth conducting a more detailed analysis. An electric train is going along the rails. The hero is standing in the carriage. He looks out the window and thinks that there was no need to go to the library. Thanks to the smartphone, he will be able to get basic knowledge about the current structure of this world. The planet hangs in the middle of space. Asmar thinks that with the help of this tool it is possible to communicate with people at long distances and search for various information. We see a pile of books. The hero thinks that in his time there was nothing like that. The roof of the carriage is shown. As far as the hero understood, about 3,000 years have passed since his death, and it can be said that magic has taken a different form. The factory chimneys are smoking. Asmar thinks that magic has become a science. This is a breakthrough, but in essence it is still the same magic. We see two faces of the guy, one real and the other ghostly. The hero thinks that the people of this world have never heard of Omega. The young man's look is sad. He cannot believe that he risked his life to protect this world. In front of us is a two-story building. The young man is standing in a room that belongs to Shioba Asuma. Judging by his look, the hero notices something. It is a family photo. A family photo. Asmar understands that the guy in whose body he ended up lost his entire family. There is a green notebook on a small table. The guy opens it and understands that this is Shioba Asuma's diary. The hero reads what is written there and sees only complaints, that the guy can't do this anymore, that no one will help him, and even the teachers don't care about him, that someone took all his savings and there is nothing in this world except suffering. Asmar looks at the notebook. He understands why the former owner of this body ended up in the hospital. He definitely had a very hard life. The smartphone vibrates. In front of us are several messages, all of them with insults, including obscene ones. The hero's eyes widen in surprise. He pays attention to the fact that the group in which the correspondence takes place belongs to the Shibuya High School for the Training of Magicians. We see a magnificent public building. It is reported that this is happening the next morning. The people around look at the hero in surprise. Two guys are visible behind his back. One of them asks if the young man is okay. Asmar turns to them and asks the surprised students if they are not waiting for him here. In front of us there are blood stains. The hero's interlocutors say that the most terrible rumors were circulating about him. Allegedly tired of enduring the mockery of those scumbags, he attempted suicide. Asmar says that he is alive and everything is fine with him. We see the back of the red-haired guy's head. He loudly calls out to the hero and declares that it is real happiness that he is safe and sound. The guy smiles menacingly. It is reported that in front of us is Tennoji Kiryu. Asmar looks at him in surprise. He recognizes this face. Behind Tennoji's back, the fire mage Kiryu is visible. The hero pronounces this name, and the red-haired guy asks in amazement what he just said. Tennoji hangs over the hero and menacingly demands that he repeat what he said. The villain clenches his fist. He declares that he seemed to have clearly told him not to catch his eye, after which he asks Asmar why he came here if his magic almost finished him off a little earlier. There is a fire visible above Tenauji's finger. This character asks if the hero has lost his memory. The bastard opens his mouth wide and says that he can remind him of how it all happened. The red-haired scoundrel's comrades are talking among themselves. One of them says that the hero is so scared that he can't answer anything, and he was so hoping to hear his pleas for mercy. The second guy offers to knock some more money out of the victim. We see the hero's eye. He understands that the messages in the chat were written by these bastards. He also guesses that this is definitely not Curio in front of him, although it is quite possible that this is his descendant. Asmar puts his thumbs in his trouser pockets. The hero's right eye glows. The young man thinks that this is a great chance to test how much magic this new body can withstand. Tenauji looks warily at his opponent. Asmar clenches his fist, preparing to strike. Asmar strikes. The students watching this are clearly unhappy about something. One of them calls Tenouji and the second calls the hero a bastard. The students rush at the young man, loudly indignant at what he is doing. Asmar understands that this body has very good compatibility with the magical element. The guy easily dodges the attacks of his opponents. He realizes that the reaction speed is ideal. Asmar stretches out his hand, deciding to check how effective the spells will be. The guy's opponents fly into the air. They look at the hero from there and try to understand what is happening to them. The students fall down with their faces distorted with horror. Tenouji comes to the foreground. He demands that all those who are in his way get out of the way. Some projectiles fly at the hero. It is reported that the Hell Cannon skill is being used. The assembled people open their mouths. They shout that a forbidden spell is being used, which cannot be used in peacetime. One of the guys advises the hero to run, because if the charges hit him, he will die. We see Tenauji with a clenched fist, and then Asmar, to whom orange shells are approaching. The hero puts his hand forward. A bright source of light appears in it, which creates a protective wall. The hero's eye glows. The guy thinks that his magic is still excellent. It is reported that the skill Partial Veil, related to the magic of destruction, was used. Tenauji, raising his fist, asks what just happened. The students look at the hero in shock. One of them says that the flame went out. Some debris falls down. The girl and two guys stand with their mouths open. One of them asks how this could have happened. Asmar puts his hands on the ground. He thinks that at the end they need to check physical training. The guy rushes forward and rushes past his opponents, dealing them numerous blows. In front of us is Tenauji, who seems completely confused. We see the face of the villain. He asks how this could happen. Tenauji opens his mouth wide and screams that he does not believe that this homeless Shioba beat up the elite of the school. We see the right eye of the bastard. The guy screams that this is simply impossible, and this scum cannot defeat the best students of the school. Flames appear. Fire bursts out of Tenauji's mouth. It engulfs the entire body of the screaming student. Asmar, whose facial features are not visible, thinks that all this looks familiar. It seems that a spell from his era is being used now. Tenauji walks forward, clenching his fists. Asmar thinks that although very pathetic, he is still a descendant of Curio, and the stressful situation seems to have awakened inner strength in him. Tenauji loudly screams that he will not forgive his opponent. The bastard raises his fist to strike. Asmar stops his opponent's hand with one finger. The opponent understands that something strange is happening and looks at the hero in surprise. Horror appears on Tenauji's face. The hero is about to flick him on the forehead. He does so, and Tenauji, tumbling, flies back. Asmar stands with his hand raised. The defeated opponents lie around him. The students who did not take part in the fight look at the winner in amazement. Asmar stands, slightly raising his right hand. He thinks that this body has ideal magical potential, but it slightly lacks physical strength. In front of us is the building of an educational institution. Asmar falls head first. A bright white flash is visible under him. The hero thinks that 3,000 years ago he was banished and killed, but the magic of reincarnation worked, and after millennia he was able to return to life. We see the hero and a ghostly figure behind him. Asmar thinks that the soul of Shioba Asuma, the owner of this body, has already left him. The guy with blue hair looks at the teacher. He thinks that he got Shioba's life. The students look back at the young man. He thinks that no matter what his life in this world turns out to be, he will not allow anyone to humiliate him anymore. Asmar sits with his hands folded in front of his face. He thinks that the descendants of those who expelled and killed him will pay for the deeds of their ancestors. The guy notices something. There is some kind of device on the table. Asmar asks what it is. A cute girl with glasses answers that it is a smart rod, a device for quickly activating modern magic. It is reported that this is the guy's classmate Shinami Ariri, nicknamed Lily. Asmar thoughtfully rubs his chin. We see two more devices. The hero thinks that modern magic is the result of the fusion of technology and magic. The teacher is standing at the podium. He suggests starting a lesson on the theory of modern magic. The young man's thoughtfulness has not disappeared. He reflects on the fact that the magic of his era is considered ancient magic today, and its users have long since died out. With the development of science, the use of modern magic has become self-evident. Asmar is writing something in a notebook. He thinks that this modern magic is quite an interesting thing. It is built around systems and theories that are unfamiliar to him. The guy is holding a pen in his hands. In front of us are mysterious drawings. The young man continues to thoughtfully rub his chin. A white cube appears in his hand. Asmar thinks that if you combine the theories of modern and already lost ancient magic, you can create a completely new kind of magic. In front of us is the back of the hero's head. He considers himself an expert in ancient magic, but he has yet to study modern magic. A smile appears on the young man's face. He wants to take the best of the two theories and create an original hybrid that only he will be able to use. Asmar smiles, folding his hands in front of him. Students are walking around the audience. Asmar is sitting next to Lily. He asks if this is the last class for today. The girl replies no. She looks at the guy and says that today they will have a monthly test, so everyone will go to the schoolyard now. Then the girl asks where the young man got such questions from. Long bangs cover half of the guy's face. He says that he understands everything, and then asks the girl's name. She says that she is Shinomiya Riri and her nickname is Lily. In front of us is a stadium. Someone says that it is time to conduct another test. We see a long-haired young man with a beard. It is reported that this is the teacher to do Jorg. He says that this is the most important test, based on the results of which they will determine what punishment is given to students best. He encourages the students to show everything they are capable of. Raising his fist, Asmar asks what kind of punishment this is. The girl asks in surprise if he really needs to explain such things. The hero asks to do it anyway. In front of us is an emblem consisting of circles and triangles. Lily says that modern magic is Kara. These are something like attributes that are classified by colors. We see several magicians and formations next to them. Lily says that fire magic is red magicians, water magic is blue, darkness magic is black, and so on. In front of us is a head, inside of which is something like a microcircuit. The girl explains that the spell is activated when a person passes mana along the magic circuit in his body, but only a limited number of circuits can be activated, so usually only one Kara is chosen. Thoughtfully rubbing his chin, the guy listens to the explanation. Lily says that Kara determines the course in which the hero will study. The teacher calls a student named Shioba Asuma. Looking disappointedly at the hero who approached, Todo asks what Kara he chose. The guy declares that he is not interested in Karas. The teacher looks at the student in amazement and asks again. Asmar boldly looks at the teacher and asks rather rudely if he has any hearing problems. He is not going to switch to any particular punishment. Todo gets angry. He asks if the guy is trying to make fun of him. The two interlocutors stand opposite each other. The students who are looking at them ask if Asmar is really going to become colorless, that is, he chose the most problematic punishment. The hero looks to his right. He hears the students' remarks and tries to understand whether someone who has abandoned the attributes is called colorless. In front of us is the right eye of a young man. Asmar thinks that the students do not see the essence, because limiting your path of development is simply stupid. A triangle is visible inside the white circles. The guy thinks that if he wants to use the potential of this body to the maximum, he must be able to use all the attributes and not rely on one specific one. In the teacher's hand is a device that was called a smart rod a little earlier. Todo asks why he got a blockhead as a student who was somehow accepted into the academy. He holds out his hand and asks if the young man is asking for another beating. The beam that comes from the smart rod rests on the hero's chin. The teacher calls him a blockhead. Asmar remembers the words he saw in the diary of the former owner of his body, that no one will help him, not even the teachers. Ignoring the beam of the smart rod, the hero boldly looks at the teacher, who states that the colorless have the most limited set of spells, because they do not use any punishment. Todo asks if the student really does not want to develop at all and if he knows the meaning of the school emblem. We see the symbol in question on the hero's chest. The guy looks at the teacher and says that, in his opinion, the colorless have the greatest power. Todo asks again in amazement. The teacher and the student continue to glare at each other. Asmar suggests a training fight and promises to clearly show how strong the colorless is. The students open their mouths in amazement. Todo is simply furious. Gritting his teeth, he asks if the student is really challenging him to a fight. Todo extends his left hand to the side and shouts loudly that today they will change the standard testing, and from this moment on, he will cancel all previous restrictions. Asmar stands calmly. With his thumbs in his pockets, he hears that there will be a duel between a teacher and a useless colorless. Lily looks at the guy with concern. She thinks that Todo has cancelled the restrictions, and among the magic teachers, he is known as the best in his field, and Shioba Asuma can be seriously injured. The opponents stand opposite each other on a green field. Tsuihou holds a smart rod in his hands and says that accidents are not uncommon in training fights, so the student should not complain and be offended later. Asura crosses his arms over his chest and replies that the teacher should worry about it himself. Tsuihou narrows his eyes, he is incredibly angry. Clutching his weapon in his hand, he asks for someone to give the signal. One of the students holds out his hand and shouts that it's time to begin. The teacher now has 2 smart rods in his hands, shouting that he is the only teacher in the entire school who can use multiple attributes of modern magic. Flames appear around Tsuihou. It is reported that he is using the skills Chain Bomb and Thunder Spear, which belong to modern magic. Bright streams rush towards Asura. The guy raises his right hand. The teacher looks at him in amazement. Blue energy streams are visible around the guy's fist. He ironically asks if his teacher really used multiple attributes. Beads of sweat roll down the teacher's face. He says that this is simply impossible. Tsuihou Jorg attacks the hero again with magic. Asura puts his hand in front of him and calmly defends himself. The teacher does not believe his eyes. He asks how the student managed to do this. The students who see what is happening are shocked to the core. We see someone's legs. Tsuihou continues to affect the student with fire energy. He screams that he cannot believe what is happening. Asura puts his right hand forward. Tsuihou, with a face distorted with fear, demands that the hero not come near him. The beam of the smart rod pokes the boy's hand. Judging by the expression on his face, the hero does not feel any pain. The young man puts his hand on the teacher's shoulder, who cries out in pain. Looking into Tsuihou's eyes, Asura demands that the teacher tell him what he did for his student, as well as all the disgusting things he has done. The young man's eye glows ominously. Asura threatens to turn Tsuihou into dust otherwise. The teacher looks at the boy in horror. He remembers how the other students bullied Shioba. Tsuihou says that he will tell everything, and immediately reports that he saw how they bullied the student and pretended that nothing was happening. The teacher punches the young man in the jaw. Tsuihou says that when the guy came to him for a consultation, he beat him up. The students look in amazement at what Asura is doing to the teacher. Lily raises her left hand. 2 students run away, declaring that they need to report everything to the director of the academy. Tsuihou kneels down. Now he falls prostrate before his student. Asura, whose lower part of his face we see, asks if the teacher is convinced. Smiling mockingly, he looks at Tsuihou and asks how it feels to lose to a colorless one. In front of us is the academy building. 2 students, with books in their hands, look at someone. One of them asks his friend to talk to him. Asura and Lily are sitting in one of the front rows of the audience. The guy who was asked to talk to the hero refuses to do so. He says that Shioba has become a completely different person. The hero has a pencil in his hand. He thinks that the last lesson for the day is over. The guy turns to Lily and calls out to her. The girl makes it clear that she is listening. Asura smiles brightly. He thanks the girl for explaining everything to him and helping him a lot. Lily, blushing, raises her hands up. She says that it is not difficult for her at all. Asura leans towards the girl and says that he has a favor to ask of her. The faces of the young people are surrounded by roses. Asura asks if Lily would like to join him. The girl looks at the young man in shock. The students, who see all this, talk excitedly. Lily is clearly excited. She agrees. The girl lowers her eyes. Lily points with her finger and says that in that direction are the club rooms, and a little to the other side is the staff room. Asura and Lily walk down the corridor. The girl shows where the lecture halls are. Asura looks up. He says that it has become clearer to him how everything works here. The guy apologizes for forcing the girl to give a tour, but now, thanks to Lily, he understands how the academy works. Lily raises her hands and says that everything is fine, while she thinks that she initially understood the phrase keep company a little wrong. Lily hunches over a little. She expected something a little different, and now she feels stupid. The girl suddenly raises her head. She jumps and screams that she did not expect anything. The hero asks in surprise what is wrong with the girl. She replies that she is fine. The students are standing in the middle of the hall, under the ceiling of which hangs a huge sphere. Lily says that the academy put all its efforts into the construction of this object. This is the Hall of Magical Research, and students have the right to use it if they apply. Asura thoughtfully rubs his chin. He turns to his companion and thanks her again for showing and explaining everything in the most detailed and accessible way. The guy says that the girl practically saved him. Looking at the young man with devoted eyes, Lily replies that he can always turn to her. The hero's face is surrounded by blue flowers. He promises to repay the favor. The girl, blushing, looks at the guy. Pressing a green book to her chest, she calls out to him. Asura makes it clear that he is listening. Looking at the guy with her huge eyes, Lily asks if it is really Shioba Asuma in front of her. Not waiting for an answer, she apologizes and says that she blurted out some nonsense. In front of us is the hero's face. The girl explains that he is simply acting completely differently today. Asura, squinting, smiles. He explains that he only came out of a coma today and all his memories are still mixed up. Lily looks closely at her interlocutor. He apologizes for making her worry. The hero's left eye is hidden by his bangs. The guy thinks that Lily is very perceptive, and it was wise of him to prepare a couple of excuses and explanations in advance. The girl, pressing a book to her chest, smiles. She apologizes for asking a strange question. The hero turns around and says that everything is fine and that he needs to leave. We see an empty corridor. Asmar is standing in front of the door. He says that this is a magical research room. A magical formation appears in front of his palm. The guy sees a strange figure under a huge sphere. The young man's palm hangs over the system screen. He mentally gives the order to use the analysis skill, which belongs to ancient analyzing magic. Many system windows appear above the guy's head. Asmar thoughtfully rubs his chin. He understands that he can use this device. The young man stands in front of the control panel surrounded by system windows. He thinks about his plan to merge ancient and modern magic, developing a completely new direction of magic. Asmar stands with his eyes closed. He is going to apply for the use of this equipment tomorrow. The guy with blue hair asks the guy if this is Shioba Asuma in front of him. Asmar looks at the young man in surprise and asks who he is dealing with and realizes that he noticed familiar features again. The young man smiles and introduces himself as Katakura Izaya from S4. He states that he is very pleased to meet you. In front of us are vague silhouettes with glowing eyes. Asmar remembers that S4 is the strongest 4 of the academy. Katakura, smiling, states that Tenauji, whom the hero defeated, was from S4. The guy raises his right hand. He admits that defeating the elite is worth a lot, especially being colorless. Katakura points his finger at the hero and says that, in general, Shioba is quite an interesting young man. Money is visible above Tenauji's hand. Katakura states that, frankly, he is tired of this character's business, and he is even grateful to the hero for what he did with this bastard. Smiling radiantly, Katakura extends his hand. He says that this is exactly why he wanted to be friends with the hero. Asmar looks at his interlocutor a little sadly. He, continuing to smile, expresses hope that they will get along. The young men shake hands. The hero says that he is also glad to meet you. Asmar feels that something is wrong with this handshake. We see the face of the young man. He understands that Katakura has cast some weak spell on him, something like a tracking bug, but he did not use a smart rod. That is, modern magic is something very natural for him. Katakura stands with his hand on his belt. The hero thinks that the last name of this student is Izaya, and he is probably a descendant of Izaya, an air mage. Katakura moves away from Asmar. He says that he has to go, and they will see each other tomorrow. The hero examines his palm. A smile appears on his face. The guy thinks that all this is very interesting, and, well, he agrees to play the game that Katakura Izaya offered him. Skyscrapers are visible behind the academy building. It is reported that the event takes place the next morning. In front of us is a sign for the staff office. Asmar approaches the counter and places a piece of paper on it, stating that he has an application. The girl with purple hair, smiling, replies that the student's request has been approved, and he can use the equipment today at 4 p.m. He has 3 hours to work. The back of the hero's head is shown. Asmar thoughtfully rubs his chin. Lily looks at the guy in surprise. Asmar is in the magic research hall. This is happening after classes. The young man's hand approaches the keyboard. He says that there is the most modern equipment here, but now he does not need this at all. He wants to focus on the world around him in time. Asmar works with the system. He uses the Great Panel skill, which belongs to ancient magic. A huge magical formation is visible above the hero's head. The guy thinks that he lived in an era when only those whose bodies had high compatibility with mana could use secret techniques. The human figure is surrounded by blue energy. Asmar remembers that ancient magic worked like this. The body collected particles of mana from the atmosphere and concentrated them inside the magic core. An arrow goes down from the magic formation. Asmar thinks that in order to activate the spell, the mana inside the magic core had to be shaped. In front of us are several more circles with intricate drawings. Asmar thinks that this process itself is unstable, so magic circles were used for safety. And the more detailed and accurate they were, the stronger the spell was. The magic circle absorbed mana from the body and released it into the world. A bright source of light is surrounded by white streams. Asmar remembers that this allowed the spell to be activated. The hero stands with an outstretched hand. He remembers that only a few could use ancient magic. A blond man with black spots on his head holds his ears. Asmar remembers that those who did not have a predisposition to magic simply could not concentrate mana inside their bodies. The guy looks up. He thinks that everything is different now. We see a white figure surrounded by a digital circle. Asmar thinks that the magical core and form have been replaced by an organ called a magical circuit. Lily looks at someone a little scared. The black figure is holding a blue device in his hands. Asmar thinks that with the help of the smart rod, mana automatically starts the magical circuit, produces an artificial magical circle, and activates the spell. In front of us are several black silhouettes. Asmar thinks that, in other words, magic has become generally available. Now it can be used even without any talent for it. The device, which was discussed just above, is broken. Asmar thinks that, on the other hand, in comparison with ancient magic, modern is much weaker and, naturally, without a smart rod, its use is impossible. The hero, smiling, rubs his chin. He says that now everything is clear to him. A white triangle hangs above his hands. The guy understands in which direction he will move. It will be an improved hybrid of modern and ancient magic. Here is another batch of triangles. Asmar thinks that for this he first needs to master modern magic perfectly and study all its attributes. The young man's hand runs along the keyboard. The hero thinks that this quantum computer will help him with calculations to create a theory of hybrid magic. Asmar stretches out his finger to press the next key. A loading bar appears on the screen. The guy stretches. He just has to wait for the calculation results, and in the meantime he is going to go buy something to drink. A white rectangle appears next to the young man. It becomes clear that this is an opening door. The light in the opening is getting brighter. There is a powerful source of radiation behind the door. Asmar flies head down. We see the hero's eyes. He thinks that the sky and the earth have changed places. Asmar is rapidly falling against the background of white clouds. He thinks that someone used modern magic on him, and a very narrow type. He does not understand how this happened, and how it was possible to do it unnoticed by him. The hero's face is upside down. Katakura extends his hand, smiling, and Asmar remembers him saying he was glad to meet him. He also remembers shaking hands. The hero's face looks thoughtful. He understands that what is happening is connected with yesterday's meeting, and he did not foresee it. Continuing to fall head down, the young man rubs the back of his head. It seems to him that this is not how you make friends. Asmar brings a clenched hand to his face. He is going to let the villain feel the difference between them. Clouds are visible under the falling hero's head. He thinks that it is unlikely that he was moved here by teleportation. Perhaps this is magic that affects consciousness and changes perception. We see the back of the young man's head. Asmar thinks that it would be typical for Isaiah to use original high-level spells. That is, 3,000 years have passed, and nothing, in fact, has changed. Asmar falls with a calm expression on his face. He tries to understand what will happen if he continues to fall down. Judging by the expression on his face, the young man notices something. Silhouettes of bats are visible next to her. Asmar thinks that these are Isaiah's artificial familiars. We see one of the bats up close. A magical formation appears in front of the hero. He thinks that he needs to hold the line and find the owner of the bats. There is a powerful flash. The hero stretches out his left hand. He thinks that first he needs to use slow magic to stop the fall. Asmar notices something again. Balls covered with large spikes are visible around him. The guy thinks that this is a magical reaction. When an attempt to counteract the spell activates a response to resistance. A magical formation is visible in front of the young man's palm. Asmar falls down among bright flashes, magic circles, and spiked balls. He thinks that the latter must be gotten rid of before they explode, since otherwise he will not have time to use slow magic. Asmar crosses his arms in front of him. We see many spiked balls. Now we see the hero's eye in close-up. The sun is shining above the planet. It seems that Asmar has ended up in space. He realizes that he can't breathe. The guy is still hanging upside down. He realizes that he is outside the planet. Katakura smiles. We see Asmar's face again. He sees hot cosmic spheres. The hero's face is shown in a familiar angle. He thinks that this will never end. The guy sighs heavily. A magical formation appears above his hand. Fragments and a chaotic pile of magical formations are visible around the hero. A powerful explosion occurs. Asmar says that he received a message from Isaiah. Asmar smiles, covering his face with his fingers. He says that it is his turn. Asmar, whose back of his head we see, thinks that such a massive attack can be easily repelled. Yellow debris flies apart. The guy understands that, nevertheless, he is still in a vacuum. The hero looks thoughtful. He thinks that at this rate he will die from lack of oxygen. Asmar hangs upside down. He realizes that this magical space is made very detailed. It looks more like a work of art. Katakura points up with his index finger. Asmar thinks that his opponent likes beautiful things. The guy looks up. He even likes what he sees. The hero hangs in space above the planet. He thinks that, given his eye's character, he will probably want to personally see his death. And this means that an autonomous spell with remote control is not used. But the enemy is somewhere nearby and watching him through his peephole. Asmar still can't straighten up in space. He thinks that he needs to find this gap. Asmar closes his eyes. He is still hanging in the middle of space. Katakura, whose hand is slightly extended forward, tries to understand if the hero has really given up. The young man smiles. He says that even if the enemy has given up, this does not mean that he will stop creating. Huge red-hot spheres appear next to Asmar. The hero does not open his eyes. It seems he wants to convince the enemy of his death. Tiny white dots appear around the figure of the young man. He understands that he needs to concentrate all the mana in the magic core and form. The hero's eyes open, he knows that then he needs to splash out everything at once. Blue magic formations rush in different directions from the hero. Fear appears on Katakura's face. Many red balls are visible around the hero. The young man smiles. He thinks that the magic circle will continue to expand, and since the space is limited, then at some point it will destabilize and then he will find the very gap he is looking for. The young man is again among the fireballs. Asmar closes his eyes again. We see spreading waves of energy. A flash occurs. Katakura looks at something in fear. We see the guy's eyes close up. A magic formation is visible in front of the hero's hand. Asmar extends his index finger forward. The fireballs begin to turn to dust. Asmar stands in front of the doorway. He says that it was a perception distortion spell after all. The young man looks out the window. We see his legs. Asmar is staring at something. It turns out that Katakura is sitting on the roof of a building. The young man is holding his own hair in his hands. The hero says that he has found an opponent. Standing on the roof, Asmar looks at Katakura. He asks the opponent if he really used his magic on him. Katakura silently looks at the hero. The latter approaches him and asks why Katakura tried to harm him. The young man covers his mouth with his fingers. Asmar, looking into the eyes of the opponent, says that he recently offered to be friends. Katakura silently looks at the hero. The young man raises both arms and one leg. Smiling happily, Katakura shouts that he is very glad that he was not mistaken in Asmar. The hero looks in surprise at the interlocutor, demonstrating clearly inadequate behavior. Blushing, Katakura says that Asmar destroyed his illusion magic and even used hover magic without using spells. It's just amazing and magnificent. Katakura seems to be really happy. He shouts that the hero used a magic circle to get out. It's just incredible. It's like seeing a divine fresco on the ceiling of a cathedral with your own eyes. Katakura clenches his fists. He says that's not all. Sparks sparkle in the student's eyes. He shouts that the destruction magic that the hero used is simply charming, and he really wants to know what kind of magic circuit Asmar used. The hero looks at him with disdain. Katakura, smiling, says that he wants nothing more than to see something beautiful destroyed. We see the profile of a young man and some kind of device on his ear. The space around Katakura is streaked with streams of gray and blue energy. Asmar looks at his opponent in shock, thinking that he again did not notice how he activated the spell. However, this could be expected from Katakura. The opponent extends his left hand and uses the Weather Fall skill, which belongs to the field of modern magic. Sharp projectiles fly at the hero's head. Katakura controls these objects with an extended finger. Asmar understands that he raised materials from the construction site with the help of the wind. Pieces of reinforcement fly at the hero. Asmar makes a series of elusive movements and passes between the projectiles. Amazement appears on his opponent's face. We see black spots on a red background. A magical formation is visible above the hero's hand. Exactly the same one hangs above his head. Katakura laughs. He says that he almost hit him and that most likely it will be a long fight. A blue sphere appears next to his ear. The poles shake. A thick electric wire flies towards the hero's head. Debris falls. The hero has to jump back to avoid being hit. In front of us is the hero's right eye. The young man thinks that there is nowhere to run, and his opponent has decided to drive him into a corner. A cluster of various objects, including quite large ones, has formed around the young man. Asmar puts his hand forward. We see a magical formation, and then the same in a mirror image. The hero crosses his arms in front of him. The opponent calmly stands in front of him and giggles. Asmar takes a defensive stance. Katakura asks if this is really all the young man can do. Katakura looks up and extends his index finger. The hero looks sadly in the same direction. A huge jet airliner is flying towards him. We see the hero's face. Katakura, spreading his arms out to the sides, says that this is his world. The guy smiles happily and declares that there is nothing more beautiful than his meteor shower. Katakura looks at the enemy through the rectangle formed by his fingers. Giggling, he says that it will be interesting to see how Asmar will get out of it this time. The hero raises his hand. Katakura, pointing his index finger up, advises the enemy to enjoy his art. The young man looks to his right. It seems that a needle is shining in Katakura's hand. Asmar makes quick movements with his hand. Katakura looks at him in amazement. Horror appears on the guy's face. He asks if Asmar has really cancelled his spell. We see the plane again. It explodes and breaks into small pieces. White streams swirl around the hero. Asmar looks calm. He was almost sure that this falling plane was just an illusion. There is a bright white flash. Asmar has a long needle in his hand. Katakura looks at him in shock. He does not understand how the hero noticed the object he hid. Asmar, stretching out his left hand, declares that he sees right through his opponent. We are reminded of how Katakura used one of his skills. Asmar says that the Weather Fall spell was just a distraction. In front of us are sparking wires. The hero says that at first there were beams, then telephone poles, and at the end there was an illusion of a falling plane. We are reminded of what a diving airliner looked like. Asmar shows the needle and says that the enemy was trying to create a hole in his defense in order to launch tranquilizer needles at him. This was the real attack. Asmar smiles and states that Weatherfall is a good, loud name, but this is a common bluff. Katakura looks at his opponent in shock. He stands against the background of broken pillars and says that he understood perfectly well that he was a master of his craft, but such tricks are useless against him. Katakura, grabbing himself by the collar, loudly shouts that the hero simply could not see through him, because not a single magician has ever been able to notice that he was activating a spell. Only the legendary great magician who lived 3,000 years ago is capable of this. We see a long-haired man, like the hero was in his past life. Katakura stands in an awkward pose in front of the hero. Asmar says that the guy is excellent at hiding traces of magic use, so he assumed that in the end he would use an inconspicuous but effective spell. The hero finds himself in front of his enemy. He raises his index finger and says that he lost for only one reason. Asmar looks his opponent in the eye. He says that he used his magic too often in front of him, which allowed him to analyze him. Asmar puts his palm on Katakura's chest. With a slight movement of his hand, he pushes the guy. Horror is on Katakura's face. In front of us is a magical formation. Katakura is trying to understand what it is. Judging by the expression on his face, Katakura is delighted. He thinks that what he sees is simply beautiful. The roof under the guy's feet begins to collapse. Asmar uses the vibration wedge skill, which belongs to ancient magic. Katakura, screaming loudly, falls on his back. He lies on the ground in front of the hero. Asmar holds a needle in his hands and declares that he has won. The young man smiles happily. In front of us is a majestic building. It is reported that it is located in the magical kingdom of Royal Kingdom, namely in its capital Grand Guy. A character with blue hair stands in front of an easel. A girl holds a brush in her hands. A brunette appears behind her, saying that the canvas seems to be emitting light. Before us is Asmar in his past life. The girl calls him a great magician. Smiling, she asks if he has returned yet. The hero's eyes shine with joy. He says that she has a beautiful painting as always. The girl blushes and declares that she is still just learning. Snippets of conversation reach the interlocutors. Kirio argues with the girl, who is wearing a rather revealing suit. The guy says that he defeated the Omega and his magic is absolute. The girl objects and takes credit for it. Isaiah looks at them sadly. She moves away from the hero, declaring that it is time for her to leave. Isaiah, holding a painting in her hands, turns around and bows. She says that she was glad to receive praise from the hero and expresses the hope that he will one day allow her to paint his portrait. The girl walks past the disputants. They frown after her. Kirio, with his hands on his hips, says irritably that Isaiah is always too shy. The girl standing next to him replies that he just irritates the artist. Isaiah walks along a magnificent corridor. She sadly looks down and thinks that mages who do not understand anything about art are simply disgusting. You don't want to talk to them at all. Isaiah remembers the hero. She thinks that her mood was ruined exactly when she managed to talk to the great mage. Isaiah notices something. A girl with pink hair is leaning against a column. Isaiah recognizes her and asks what happened. Siwon stares at Isaiah. She says that the head of the sect recently contacted her and conveyed the emperor's order. Isaiah asks again in surprise. Siwon whispers something in her ear. Isaiah is shocked. She says that this simply cannot be. The girl opens her mouth wide and screams that Lord Asmar would never have started a rebellion. Siwon looks at the girl angrily and says that it is a fact, because the emperor has the power to foresee the future and his words are absolute. Isaiah cries and, lowering his eyes, says that this is impossible. The hero would never go against them and against Grand Guy, because there is nothing beautiful in this. The two girls stand opposite each other in the hallway. Isaiah asks why the great mage does this. Katakura looks at the ceiling. There is nothing but fluorescent lamps. The guy sits up in bed. It is reported that the action takes place in the infirmary of the Academy of Magic in our time. Katakura grabs his head with his hand. It seems to him that it was some kind of terrible dream. Next to the young man's head appears a bottle. Katakura looks at it in amazement. Asmar is sitting in front of him. The hero says that this is a drink with electrolytes, and there is sugar in it. He adds that the guy had a nightmare and he tossed and turned in his sleep. Katakura has a very sad expression on his face. He hears from his interlocutor that he was pouring out like hail and now he needs to quickly replenish the lost fluid. Katakura looks down detachedly. He asks why Asmar saved him. The guy remembers the moment of the battle when the roof was cracking under his feet. Asmar looks at the injured young man and says that he hit him with his spell almost point blank. It would hardly have happened without consequences. Katakura looks at the hero in surprise. He says that, fortunately, the guy's magic circuit is normal and he did not receive serious injuries. Katakura points at something with his finger. It turns out that this is a towel that the hero is holding in his hand. We see this piece of fabric up close. Katakura says that there are traces of sweat on it. Katakura looks at the hero in shock and asks if he really looked after him. The guy smiles and replies that he would not like to lose such a good magician. We see Katakura's blue eyes. He picks up the bottle and thanks the hero for his concern. Katakura says that Asmar shouldn't think that everyone in S4 is like Kiryu. Katakura is sitting on the bed. He states that Kiryu is very strong as a magician, but the boy doesn't agree with this man's disgusting behavior. Asmar, sitting on a chair, looks at the young man, who says that he just wanted to know what the hero is capable of since he was able to defeat Kiryu. Katakura grabs the blanket and says that he is very ashamed of what Kiryu did, who mocked the hero and did everything so that he left the academy, and he is also very sorry that he seemed not to notice any of this. Asmar looks at his interlocutor. He is sitting with his eyes closed. The hero, smiling, says that Katakura is not a bad person. Asmar puts his hand to his chest and states that he will forget about the fact that he attacked him, and in return offers to make a deal. In front of us is the hero's right eye. Now we see the left eye of his interlocutor. He asks again about the deal. Leaves are falling around the hero sitting on a stool. He says that he wants Katakura to leave S4 and create a new faction in this academy together. Katakura asks again in amazement. We see the faces of two guys. The hero thinks that his interlocutor does not remember what happened 3,000 years ago, and he wants to trust this young man. The hero sitting on a stool is shown from the back. He thinks that at the moment he is completely alone, but he needs allies to achieve what he wants. Leaves are falling next to the hero. He says that he has a goal, and he wants to achieve it together with Katakura. He looks at his interlocutor thoughtfully. The guy gets up from the bed. He sits down in front of the hero on one knee. Looking down, Katakura says that he will do as Lord Asuma says. Asmar, smiling, looks at the young man. Katakura kneels in front of the hero and declares that he will do everything as he asks. We see the guy's face and a scene from the distant past. Katakura thinks that all this is very strange. He has a feeling as if another him once upon a time long ago already experienced these feelings. We see the hero's right eye. The guy notices a very surprised girl and says that a nurse is watching them. The medical worker raises both hands and asks for forgiveness. She says that she did not do it on purpose. Asmar is about to leave. He declares that it is time for him to go, and he will contact Katakura later. The hero takes the medical record. He shows the document to the nurse and states that it describes the condition of the patient's magic circuit. He asks the girl to read it. The nurse looks at the document handed to her. Her eyes widen in surprise. She does not understand how the hero could describe everything in such detail. Asmar leaves. The girl behind asks him to wait. She asks if he would like to enter the research institute as her scholarship holder. Asmar, smiling, turns around and says that he is not going to do this. The academy he studies at suits him completely. Katakura looks at the back of the leaving hero. Asmar is working in the magic research hall. He thinks that he was slightly distracted, and the quantum computer has almost finished the analysis. A keyboard is visible in front of the guy. A system window with the results of the analysis appears. It says that the theory proposed by the hero is approved as a new magic system. It is recommended to speak at the conference with this theory. Asmar rubs his chin thoughtfully. He thinks that this is simply excellent, and his idea turned out to be correct, and now he has the basis for creating hybrid magic. We see several magic formations first, and then multicolored streams of energy. The hero thinks that the next step is to systematize individual magic formulas. He needs to adapt the magic circuit to his needs and check all the attributes, so it seems that the research hall will be useful to him more than once. The hero smiles. Continuing to work with the keyboard, he looks up. Asmar thinks that this new hybrid will surpass all ancient magic and will become truly innovative. In front of us is the academy building. It is reported that this is happening the next day. A teacher is standing at the podium. He is looking at a green book. The hero is sitting at a desk with a pen in his hand. We see a man with a raised index finger. He says that this student's grades have suddenly improved. In front of us is another man. In his opinion, the hero is cheating. The third teacher, holding out her hand, declares that the boy needs to be closely watched. The teacher standing behind the podium thinks that it is almost impossible to cheat on the oral exam. He approaches the board, raises his hand with a piece of chalk and tells the students that they need to solve an equation on the theory of modern magic. The man points his finger at the hero and calls him colorless. Smiling, the teacher raises his left hand and declares that Asmar seemed to have fought with Professor Tadujorg, so solving such an equation would be easy for him. The teacher places his hands on the table. Asmar stands at the board with chalk in his hand. He declares that this is the equation of the activation potential of the magic circuit. The boy draws a line on the board. The students look at what is happening in shock. The teacher shouts loudly, his mouth wide open. We see a completely covered blackboard, behind which stand a teacher and a student. Asmar says that this theory was proposed by Albert Newman in 1880 according to the magical calendar, and it is based on the expansion of the brain's computing capabilities. Professor Newman managed to analyze the magical circuit inside the body, which was considered impossible. The students, with their mouths open, listen to the hero's explanation. He states that thanks to this scientific approach, magic has become available even to those who do not have an innate predisposition to it. Beads of sweat run down the teacher's face. He hears that the Newman Corporation continued to develop the professor's ideas and created smart rods, thanks to which accelerated activation of spells became possible. Asmar looks at the teacher and says that one of these devices is hanging on his side. We see this device up close. The teacher, stuttering, says that he heard the correct answer and allows the hero to take his place. He steps away from the board. The teacher does not understand what kind of genius is in front of him, because this question was at the level of the University of Tokyo. The students stand there with their mouths open. Asmar sits down next to Lily, thinking that he will need to reapply for the use of the magic research hall. The girl looks at the guy in amazement. The students rise from their seats. It is announced that the lunch break has begun. In front of us is a group of students. They tearfully beg Lily to fulfill their request and are ready to do anything for this. One of them says that Asmar communicates only with her. Lily looks at her comrades, in whose eyes yellow lights sparkle. The girl raises both hands. The hero enters the classroom. He is met with enthusiastic glances and exclamations of his fellow students. Lily sighs heavily and still promises to ask. The hero sits down next to her. The girl calls out to the young man. Smiling, she asks if he is free after school and invites them to go together to a magic cafe. Asmar looks at Lily in surprise, who says that if he is busy, it is okay, they will understand. The young man thoughtfully rubs his chin. The students look at the boy with excitement. A smile appears on his face. The young people begin to shout in admiration when Asmar, whom we see surrounded by roses, agrees to go with them. Someone is looking at the students from outside. It is a girl with a yellow flower in front of her face. She declares that she is Shioba Asuma. We see the hero's profile. The girl thinks that he has a handsome face and a pleasant personality. She crushes the flower she was holding in her hand. Sitting on a tree, she declares that she will destroy all this. People are walking in front of a catering establishment. It is reported that this is the magical Cafe Luminous. Asmar stands in front of several flush students. They bombard him with questions about his favorite food, why he decided to become colorless, and whether the people from S4 are really looking for him. One of the girls asks if he has a best friend. The hero smiles. Lily indignantly shouts for the young people to ask questions in turn. Asmar puts his hand on his coffee cup and starts answering. He says that he likes cheeseburgers the most, chose the colorless direction because it was the most optimal solution, and that he does not know where the rumor came from that S4 is looking for him. The students look at their interlocutor carefully. One of the girls raises her hand and says that she has one more question. Smiling, the hero answers that his best friend is Lily. She, hearing this, screams loudly. The students standing behind the girl clench their fists. Lily crushes the cup with the drink in her hand. She thinks that under no circumstances will she allow the hero to deceive her again. One of the girls screams loudly that her coffee has spilled. Lily wipes her clothes with a towel. Her comrades, looking from the side, think that she was so touched by this confession that she withdrew into herself. Asmar looks at the girl guiltily and apologizes for scalding her. Lily looks at the guy and says that he has nothing to apologize for. The students happily raise their fists. One of them says that they are not in the elite class, so many are jealous of the hero's success. One of the girls brings a bagel to her mouth. She says that, among other things, Shioba Asuma received the nickname Neat. Lily cannot understand when they managed to come up with this nickname. The young man raises his index finger. He says that it means not an education, employment, or trading. The students laugh cheerfully. They say that another nickname suits the hero much more, an unusually unique rare talent. Asmar modestly lowers his eyes. He says that everything is clear to him and, most likely, the students are right. Lily cannot believe that the guy just accepted such strange praise. We again see the cafe from the outside. In front of us are the legs of young people. They are walking in an impressive group. One of the guys asks if it is really possible to call the guy that. He answers that he does not mind at all. The students pick up their phones. They again happily raise their hands, this time because they have the hero's contacts. Someone is watching the company. The young man puts the phone to his ear and says that the hero has left the cafe. In front of us is the young man's right eye. Lily happily thanks the guy for agreeing to walk with her and her friends. Asmar puts his finger to his lips. The girl's face appears in amazement. A whole crowd of students in white jackets appears in front of the young people. The hero, looking at them, asks what business they could have with him. We see the faces of two young men, and then two more. A car drives up. Students in identical suits line up in front of it. One of the guys opens the door. Someone gets out of the car. In front of us is a young man in glasses. Someone notices that he is from S4. The students with whom the hero went to the cafe look at this man in surprise. The guy who got out of the car asks the hero if his name is Shioba Asuma. The young man holding a sword in his left hand introduces himself as Fukada-shin. He says that he is the head of the Academy's club association. Asmar, looking at him, again experiences a strange feeling. He is convinced that this is a descendant of Shivan. Before us are the faces of a girl who lived 3,000 years ago and a guy who has just approached the hero. Katakura is visible not far from Fukata. A young man in glasses states that he has heard rumors that the hero was looking after Katakura when he was hospitalized. Asmar silently looks at his interlocutor. He states that he is grateful to the guy for this act of mercy and therefore apologizes for his next words. Fukata puts forward his index finger and says that in order to defend the honor of S4, he challenges the hero to a magic duel. Lily cries out in surprise. We see the profiles of 4 young men. A girl in a hat is looking at the hero. Asmar, whose eye we see, thoughtfully says the phrase magic duel, which he just heard from Fukata. The guy turns to Lily and asks her to explain what this means. She asks why the young man always knows nothing. The girl whispers to the hero what a magic duel is. Fukata looks sternly at the guy and asks if he has made a decision yet. We see the right eye of this young man. He says that he has had enough, and he will no longer allow the harmful elements of the academy to do whatever they want. Asmar pays attention to the hand in which he holds the sword. The hilt of the weapon glows. The hero looks closely at the enemy and understands that this is not a magical trace. Fukata stands against the background of a bright yellow glow. The hero thinks that this is not a thirst for blood, but something else, most likely a battle aura. Streams of yellow energy approach the young man's throat. Asmar carefully assesses the situation and understands that this magic is not directed only at him. Exactly the same streams are visible next to the students with whom he went to the cafe. The hero understands that Fukata is threatening all his classmates. The S4 representative looks menacingly at the guy, who understands that this bastard took hostages so that he would definitely not be able to refuse the duel. A girl with blue hair is visible above the push-up Fukata. The hero thinks that Siwon has always tried to master not only magic, but also other useful skills to perfection. The young man smiles. He looks at his interlocutor and says that he agrees to accept the challenge. Fukata smiles back and thanks the guy for the choice he made. His hands are on the sword. We see 2 young men. And now another one. Fukata turns away from the hero and declares that the duel will take place tomorrow at 8 AM at the central arena of the academy. He calmly walks to the car. The hero, who is watching him, thinks that this character should train for at least 10,000 more years before trying to challenge him. Asmar smiles. He mentally calls Siwon and advises her to get ready. We see a 2-story building. The hero is sleeping on the bed. The left side of his face is illuminated more than the right. Asmar opens his eyes. He is sitting, dressed in armor. The guy asks what this place is. If he is inside a dream, then it turns out that this is a lucid dream. Asmar thoughtfully rubs his chin. He remembers the lesson he attended, and then the teacher explained that this happens during the deep sleep phase, when a person can partially control his visions and dive into the depths of his subconscious. Asmar raises his index finger. He says that everything turned out very well, and now he will try to do something. The guy puts his fingers on his chest and says that he will try to find the original owner of his body. A source of light appears between his fingers. The hero thinks that when he was reborn, he noticed a little motionless mana in the depths of the magic chain. A circle formed by white dots appears between the hero's hands. Asmar remembers that he decided then not to use this mana, but to save it in his body, and now with its help he can find residual traces of the original owner of the body. The guy looks at something. We see the back of a young man. Asmar thinks that, in other words, he will be able to find the remains of Shioba Asuma's thoughts. In front of us are several magical formations. The hero thinks that with the help of magic he will try to give form to the thoughts of the previous owner of the body, but he has never used ancient magic in this direction. A powerful flash occurs. The hero thinks that now he will have to experiment. In front of the hero and under him are visible numerous magical formations. He says that the coefficient is 764664235336. 2 templates will be the basis. Then you need to make a drawing of a magic circle, create a new spell and mentally pronounce it. Asmar touches his temple with his finger. He thinks that this is the spiritual domain, a new spell that can be used inside a dream. It seems to him that he is the only one who will use it. The brightest glow appears in front of the hero. The guy looks at it with hope. A human silhouette appears in front of him inside a white vortex. A young man is seen surrounded by small blue rectangles. We see the right eye of this character. It opens completely. Shioba looks at Asmar and asks where he is. The hero declares that the rescue was successful. Shioba raises his hands. He tries to formulate a thought, but he does not do it very well. Beads of sweat run down Shioba's face. He says that he does not understand anything. The young man falls to one knee and screams loudly. The hero looks at him and thinks that synchronization with the memories of this body has begun. Shioba looks at her interlocutor in surprise. He is lying on the floor. Next to him you can see a bottle of pills. Shioba says that he remembered that he was in his room and tried to commit suicide and then lost consciousness. We see the lower part of the young man's face. He says that he was in a coma in Shoto Hospital in Shibuya and did not come to. The faces of the two young men are shown next to each other. Shioba says that he should not have woken up. Asmar looks at his interlocutor a little sadly and says that he is absolutely right since he has borrowed his body now. Asmar, dressed in armor, stands over Shioba, who is kneeling. He apologizes for doing this without the young man's permission, and he replies that he does not mind at all. Shioba closes his eyes and says that he would never have woken up anyway, and would have been lying in the hospital as a vegetable for an unknown amount of time. The young men shake hands. Shioba asks permission to ask a question, after which he asks why Asmar was reborn in his body after 3,000 years. The hero is lost in thought and cannot understand what to answer. Shioba excitedly raises his fist. In front of us are two opponents whom Asmar has already defeated. The guy asks if the hero really dealt with Tenaji from S4 and Professor Jorg, who is considered the strongest among the teachers. Asmar looks past the young man with a detached expression. He confirms that he defeated the mentioned characters because they wanted to harm him. Shioba says that Katakura, who is also from S4, is also in this row. Asmar stands in front of his trembling interlocutor. He confirms that he defeated Katakura because he also wanted to harm him. Shioba excitedly shouts that tomorrow the hero will have a duel with Fukada, who is also from S4. We see the guy in glasses in question. Asmar, with his arms folded across his chest, repeats like some kind of machine that he will win. Shioba does not let him finish and finishes the sentence for her interlocutor, stating that Fukada also wants to harm. Shioba clutches his head in horror. He does not understand what is happening at all. The guy shouts that he is the most ordinary student and should not attract so much attention to himself. The young man calms down and brings his folded hands to his face. A smile appears on his face. He finally realizes that this does not concern him in any way since he is dead. Leaves fall around the hero's face. We see a clenched fist and again hear Shioba asking why the hero was reborn in his body after 3,000 years. A white cloud floats in the night sky. Shioba thinks he knows what it is. He is shown above a black celestial body. The young man remembers that in this dream he was floating in impenetrable darkness. Next to him a stream of stars fell and they were all sucked into a huge black hole. Shioba looks up. He says that he was all alone there. A bright white flash occurs near the young man. He says that then he noticed a glow, and it shimmered very brightly. Shioba stretches out his hand towards the source of the light. He states that for some reason he thought that the glow was resisting something and was experiencing great pain. The young man holds the light source in his hands. He says that he then decided that if this light does not want to be swallowed by the darkness, he will take its place. Asmar silently looks at the former owner of his body. He raises his right hand and says that he is just a loser who cannot finish anything. He is the one who wants to die, but is still alive. A smile appears on Shioba's face. He says that, on the other hand, Asmar is the one who wants to live despite being dead. The hero looks at the boy sadly. He smiles, puts his hand to his chest and says that he is very glad that his former body now belongs to Asmar. Perhaps it was intended for him from the very beginning. Asmar irritably declares that this is not so. Shioba looks at his interlocutor in surprise. Asmar angrily shouts that the guy got it all wrong. This body belongs to both of them. If it were not for both of them, the current Shioba Asuma would never have existed. The faces of the young men are shown one above the other. Asmar says that therefore this is now their common history and he can fulfill the guy's wish. A white glowing circle is visible between the two young men. Shioba has tears in his eyes. He raises his hand to wipe them away. Asmar holds out a clenched fist. A smile appears on Shioba's face. Their fists touch. Shioba smiles and thanks the current owner of her body. We see two pairs of legs. Asmar asks if Shioba will fulfill his wish. He smiles and declares that he is happy even just to hear these words. Shioba thinks and asks how he can be useful to the hero, because in front of him is the legendary great magician who lived 3,000 years ago. Asmar, smiling slightly, says that, of course, the guy can be useful to him. The two young men slowly walk forward. Asmar says that, for example, today after classes he went to a magic cafe. Shioba looks at her interlocutor in surprise. He says the phrase in English Star Magic Cafe English breakfast first tea latte all soy change to white mocha eat in, and asks to explain the meaning of this spell. Lily makes an order in the cafe. Asmar says that the girl clearly and quickly said this spell and he would like to study it in more detail. Shioba laughs. He steps forward a little and says that, of course, he can help, especially since this is not a difficult task at all. The young man's leg becomes ghostly. Shioba looks at something in surprise. Asmar says that it seems that his body is starting to wake up and their time is running out. Shioba smiles. He thanks Mr. Asuma for bringing him back to life. The young people stand opposite each other. Shioba says that now he will watch where their common history will lead. Asmar stretches out his hand and asks to wait. Shioba slowly disappears. A bright source of light is visible behind his head. The young man disappears completely, leaving behind bright white dots. Asmar clenches his fist. He closes his eyes and says that even if these were just his residual thoughts, he wants to spare Shioba from regrets. A written diary appears in front of the young man. Asmar raises his fist to his chin. He thinks that 3,000 years ago he already broke one promise and will not repeat it. In front of us are buildings in the Asian style. It is reported that they belong to Fukaishin and are located in the Tokyo district of Shibuya. A young man is sitting in front of a huge crystal. The guy, with his eyes closed, is sitting on his knees. We see his profile. A bright crystal towers over a young man. We see the object up close. It is said to be Aurichal, a nitride of urusite that is only mined in mines that have been in Fukata's family for generations, one of the hardest minerals on Earth. Fukata appears to be meditating. We see a drop falling into the water. The boy opens his eyes. He takes out his sword. Fukata strikes the crystal. The boy puts the sword back in its sheath. It turns out that the crystal has been chopped into several pieces. The young man looks at the destroyed mineral. The boy is shown from slightly above. We see his eyes. Fukata looks to his left and notices someone. A girl is sitting on the porch of a house. The boy says that he asked the guards not to let her in. Smiling sweetly, the girl says that they have an emergency. It is said that in front of us is Mizuhara Miyun from S4. We see a smart rod in crystals. The girl says that this mineral is 30 times harder than diamond, and its monoconductivity is 100 times better than iridium. It is an extremely rare mineral that has been used in the production of smart rods for 17 generations in a row. The girl spreads her arms out to the sides and says that she cannot believe that Fukata is using Aurichal as a training doll, but the guy, in any case, is true to himself. A young man, who is standing some distance from the girl, says that he watched the video she sent him and he still finds it hard to believe that Shioba defeated Tenouji and Katakura. Folding her arms over her chest, the girl says that this is simply amazing. Fukata adjusts his glasses on his nose. He says that he got into S4 on the recommendation of the director of the academy, but these two made it to the elite on their own. In front of us are the young men who make up S4. Fukata says that they were the face of the academy. Looking sadly ahead, the boy declares that he will not leave anyone who challenges their status unpunished. The happy girl makes strange sounds. Mizuhara puts his index finger to the corner of his mouth and declares that Fukata is absolutely right, but if he looks down on the hero just because he is colorless, he will regret it greatly. In front of us again Tenouji and Katakura. The girl urges her comrade not to forget what happened to them. Fukata raises his sword above his head. He declares that with the secret techniques of the magic sword that are passed down in the Shin family, he will win the magic duel. The sword seems to cut the Earth's satellite in half. Fukata declares that he takes an oath on this moon. The boy brings the sword to his face. He says that he is ready for all the surprises that his opponent can prepare, and the prestige of the academy is more important than even human life. Mizuhara puts her fist to her neck. She says that Fukata is thinking in the right direction and urges him to trample Shioba's beautiful face. Looking at the guy, she asks with a smile if that person will appear. Fukata, smiling, replies that this will not happen under any circumstances. No matter which way the duel goes, there will be no need for it. The crystals glow. Looking back over his shoulder, Fukata states that a servant will be enough for him. In front of us is the academy building. It is reported that this is happening the next morning. The hero stands with his hands on his belt. Smiling, he says that it is time to go to a magic duel. Asmar approaches the academy building. We see a bright flash. A description of the magic duel begins. In front of us are two fighting students. It is reported that educational institutions officially allow magicians to conduct fights with each other using magic. The squares depict letters of the Latin alphabet. Lily says that based on the results of the magic duel, the student receives a rank, and the higher it is, the more privileges within the academy. The girl's silhouette is surrounded by roses. The clock shows 10 to 8. Asmar and Lily are in the waiting room of the central arena. The girl, looking at the guy with anxiety, asks that he simply could not help but know everything she just told him, because this is the first thing they teach students at this educational institution. Asmar adjusts the sleeve of his shirt and says that he hears about this for the first time. He thanks the girl for explaining everything clearly. Lily looks at the guy with distrust. She tries to understand if this is due to the fact that his memories are still confused. The girl nervously crumples her dress. Resolutely looking up, she thinks that she must support the guy in any way she can. Symbols are visible around the girl. She thinks that while she was explaining all the details of the duel to the young man, they somehow imperceptibly walked together into the waiting room. Lily starts imagining very romantic things to you, including a massage before the duel, and tries to understand if Asmar is going to ask her for something special. The hero calls out to her from behind and the girl screams nervously. He shows her two ties and asks which one is better. Lily points to a black tie. The guy ties it around his neck and thanks his companion. The girl nervously clenches her fists. She understands that she has started having some kind of sick fantasies. Continuing to tie the tie, Asmar says that the girl mentioned that a student can raise his rank during a duel. He asks if with a higher rank he will be able to use the magic research hall longer. Lily, clenching her fists in anger, screams that, of course, yes, after which she asks if this is really the only thing that interests the young man. Asmar, smiling, answers that this is what worries him most of all. Lily looks at the hero and admits that she does not understand him at all. The young people are sitting on a blue bench. Asmar says that Fukata called him a harmful element of the academy. The girl remembers a couple more phrases of the mentioned character, in particular about peace among students and that Asmar behaves inappropriately within the walls of the academy. Fukata adjusts his glasses on his nose. The girl says that these arguments were presented as the reason for the challenge to a duel. Lily points to the phone screen and asks if the hero has seen the academy's website. Here are several pages from this resource. It is reported that Fukata from S4 will fight against the colorless Shioba Asuma, and the head of the academy's club association, which guards order, will punish the student who causes damage to the academy. Asmar looks closely at the smartphone screen. He says very calmly that nothing can be done about it. The girl asks in surprise if her interlocutor is really not nervous at all. Band notes fly around the hero's future opponent. Lily says that Fukata is studying the techniques of the magic blade, which have been passed down in his family for generations, and he is also the heir to a large company that owns mines that extract rare metals needed to produce smart rods. His family donates billions to the Academy Fund. Lily looks at the hero and says that this is why no one in the Academy dares to go against him. The girl is very worried. She says that even if the hero had a good reason for his actions, Fukata will still make it look like Shioba is to blame for everything. The guy thoughtfully rubs his chin and says that he understands. He looks at the interlocutor. Smiling, the guy points to his tie and asks if he tied it correctly. The girl, next to whom the lights are sparkling, says that everything is perfect. Asmar thanks his interlocutor. He gets up from the bench and says that it is time to go to a duel. The girl tries to stop the young man. She asks if he listened to her at all. The hero walks down the corridor. Someone appears in front of him. It is Katakura. The young people stand opposite each other. Their faces come closer. Surprise appears on the hero's face. The guys separate. Lily tries to understand what happened between them. She raises her index finger and asks herself if this is really what she thinks. Students are sitting in the stands. It is reported that the action takes place in the central arena. In front of us is the back of Fukata's head. The students are cheering him enthusiastically, declaring that he is the strongest fighter in S4. A guy with a sword visible on his side resolutely walks forward. A group of enthusiastic girls demand that the young man crush the enemy with one blow. The hero appears. Lily looks at him a little sadly. Mizuhara is also visible in the stands. The opponents are standing opposite each other in front of the stands. Fukata praises the opponent for not running away. The hero, calmly looking into his eyes, thanks him for the high praise. The students are standing opposite each other in the arena. We see Fukata's eyes. He asks who is in front of him. Behind Asmar, he is seen only in his previous life. The guy thinks that his opponent noticed that there is another soul in this body. Behind Fukata, the previously defeated S4 representatives are visible. He says that the hero defeated Tenauji and Katakura, so he takes this incident very seriously. In front of us is the lower part of the young man's face. He says that the possibility of an accident or coincidence is excluded, so he asks who is in front of him. Fukata extends his index finger forward. Asmar looks in surprise at the part of the opponent's right limb, which hangs right next to his nose. The girls sitting in the stands scream loudly. Only Mizuhara remains relatively calm. The bangs finally reveal the hero's left eye. We see him up close. The young man declares that he is Shioba Asuma, nothing more and nothing less. Now in front of us is the left eye of his opponent. Fukata examines the hero, who stands in front of him completely calmly. The S4 representative thinks that he did not flinch in front of his fighting aura. Fukata, smiling, declares that in fact it does not matter that much who is in front of him. Asmar and Fukata stand opposite each other. The latter declares that he is not going to give any advantage, and the young man should be prepared for this. Fukata takes out his sword and declares that he will get rid of the pest at any cost. Asmar calmly declares that he wanted to say exactly the same thing. The enemy cannot expect mercy from him. The students stand opposite each other. The hero, smiling, looks at the enemy. We see the faces of the opponents standing opposite each other. The mustachioed man raises his hand and declares that a magic duel is announced. Someone next to him raises his hand and asks to wait. Asmar is a little surprised. Fukata folds his fingers in a certain way and declares that, as was said earlier, he is not going to give any concessions, but he can show mercy because the noble house of Shin has its own principles. The guy brings his index finger to his forehead and declares that if Asmar immediately writes an application for expulsion from the academy, he will refuse to participate in the duel. The hero is reflected in his opponent's glasses. Fukata says that this will help the young man avoid unnecessary pain, and he will not have to embarrass himself in front of the students gathered here. Asmar thoughtfully rubs his chin. He turns his face to the judge and asks him what rank he will receive if he wins this duel. The mustachioed man raises his index finger and says that Fukata has rank S and ranks first in the student rankings, while Asmar has rank F and ranks 12-0. Letters of the Latin alphabet are visible in front of the hero's face. The judge says that if the guy wins, he will receive rank. Asmar calmly states that he understands everything. The hero stretches out his hand towards his opponent and states that if President Fukata immediately raises his rank to S, he will refuse to participate in the duel. Smiling, the young man declares that in this case Fukata will avoid unnecessary pain and will not have to disgrace himself in front of the students gathered here. Hearing these words, Fukata falls into a rage. The students sitting in the stands look at what is happening in amazement. Lily puts her hand to her chest. Fukata grinds his teeth in rage and shouts that he has not met such empty-headed idiots for a long time. He says that the guy can cry and beg for forgiveness, but now he will definitely not stop. The hero calmly looks at the enraged opponent, who promises that he will not leave even a wet spot on the guy. We see the two opponents one above the other. Asmar says that Fukata can try to carry out his threats. He calls out to the judge standing behind him. The man makes it clear that he is listening, after which Fukata demands to start the duel. Asmar and his opponent stand opposite each other. The hero looks closely at Fukata. He thinks that he is the reincarnation of Siwon, and if he lets down his guard even a little, he can lose. The hero's right eye begins to glow. The guy decides to use ancient magic to the fullest. Purple circles are visible between his hands. A magical formation appears above Asmar's head. The students watching what is happening excitedly talk to each other. Someone asks what kind of circle it is. Another answers that he also sees it for the first time. A third, who has a mobile device in his hands, says that he cannot find this formation in the list of modern magic. A purple sphere appears above the hero's hand. A charge of energy flies at the enemy. Fukata calmly watches it approach. The ground cracks, fire bursts out from under it. An obstacle grows in front of Fukata, and a blue charge smashes against it. Asmar stares at the number 1 ranked player. He realizes that he is using Earth Magic Auto Defense, which means that he has scattered sand soaked in magic around the arena in advance. The face of his distant ancestor is visible next to Fukata's head. The guy thinks that Siwon is approaching everything thoroughly. Stone fragments are flying above Fukata. He says that according to reports, Asmar is using an unknown type of magic, but he does not care since it simply will not work against him. Fukata grabs his sword and declares that he will finish this duel with one blow. The hero notices something. He pays attention to the sword and realizes that this weapon combines a smart rod and a blade. A yellow circle is visible around Fukata. Asmar looks at his opponent and thinks that he was able to cross the battle aura and barrier spells of the earth attribute, which complement each other. This absolute space seems like an impenetrable rock. Bright white lines are visible around Fukata. The hero understands that if he starts an attack now, the enemy will simply repel it and then immediately attack in response. Streams of purple smoke rise around Fukata. Asmar, smiling, looks at the enemy and thinks that this is a very interesting move, and now it is necessary to somehow destroy the absolute space of Shivon. Fukata looks at the hero and says that he showed up at their prestigious academy and stirred up everyone. He calls the guy a dirty pest who violated the harmony. Fukata takes up the sword. He thinks that he will not leave this just like that. We see this young man almost in full. He thinks that he trains daily and tempers his spirit. Before us are Fukata's eyes. He believes that as a magical swordsman he has no equal. Asmar calmly looks at the enemy holding a sword in his hand. Fukata thinks that this colorless one cannot be stopped by his weapon. The students in the stands loudly cheer for the S4 representative, demanding that President Shin crush the upstart. The arena cracks under the hero's foot. The guy looks up in surprise. Hands appear under his feet. The young man's face is alarmed. He understands that the enemy is using a delay spell, depriving him of a chance to dodge the blow. Fukata holds onto the hilt of the sword. He delivers a series of blows using the secret techniques of the Shin House, which are called Full Moon and Magic Blade. Mizuhara, smiling, declares that this blade can cut even the strongest metal on Earth. She asks what Asuma will do. Bright white marks from the blows are visible in front of the hero. Asmar takes off his tie. He says that he spent so long tying it, but now nothing can be done about it. The tie flies into the air. Asmar uses the magic crystal skill, which belongs to the ancient tempering magic. A weapon with a blue blade appears in the guy's hand. A white magical formation is visible in front of his hand. Fukata looks at the enemy in amazement. He does not understand what is happening. The spectators excitedly discuss what they saw. One of them shouts that the blow was stopped by a tie. The second says that he sees the president's magical blade that cuts everything in a row. The third says that this spell is not on the list either. Streams of blue energy are visible in front of Asmar. He uses the particle curtain skill, which belongs to the ancient magic of destruction. The hands that grab the hero by the legs a little earlier dissolve into thin air. Fukata sees the ghostly outline of the hero in front of him. The young man looks at them in amazement and does not understand where Asmar could have disappeared to. The hero smiles, he thinks that his turn has come. Fukada grinds his teeth in anger and makes a strange sound. The guy's hand is on the hilt of the sword, he thinks that as soon as Asmar attacks, he is finished. Fukada is inside a rather bright yellow circle. His eyes glow menacingly, the guy thinks that his absolute space is impossible to destroy. Asmar flies up to his opponent from behind. Fukada looks back, he thinks that this idiot is walking into a trap himself. Asmar strikes. The ground cracks. A huge fist grabs the blade that the hero is holding. Asmar notices something. Fukada shouts that the hero has been caught. The S4 representative strikes, it is reported that he is using the full moon magic blade. Asmar looks up. We see his hand. The guy rests his hand on the ground. Asmar crouches down. Fukada asks in amazement if his opponent is really going to attack with his bare hands, because this is pure suicide. Asmar runs towards many hands. A white magic formation is visible above his head. We see a white tie. Fukada looks at it in amazement. Asmar strikes. Fukada blocks it. The S4 representative, gritting his teeth in anger, looks at the enemy. He asks if the hero really has a second blade. Asmar is standing with a sword in his hands. Lily, who is sitting in the stands, realizes that the tie has turned into a weapon. The girl remembers how the guy asked her for advice on which of these accessories is better. The opponents cross their blades. The hero looks at the enemy and says that he did not intend to draw a second blade in this fight, but he was faced with a truly outstanding fighter. Fukada, frowning from tension, says that Asmar is the first one who managed to get close to him. A smile appears on Fukada's face. He says that his opponent has earned the right to be the first to see that very secret technique. Asmar calmly looks at the enemy. We see the weapon against the background of the moon. Fukada summons the magic blade Misty Full Moon. The opponents continue to fight. The hero squints his left eye. Fukada tries to strike with the magic blade, which he calls Misty New Moon. The moon is visible above Asmar's head. Mizuhara, smiling, says that this is a secret technique of the Shin family. First the blade destabilizes the enemy, and then pierces him through, and it is impossible to dodge such a thing. Fukada pierces the hero. He grits his teeth in pain. Fukada looks at the enemy and uses the moon crater explosion skill. A powerful flash of fire occurs. Asmar flies back. The blade falls from his hands. Lily desperately tries to shout to the hero. We see two girls. In front of us are several more students. Asmar is lying on the ground. Fukada, sword in hand, thinks that he went a little too far and killed the enemy. The guy turns to the judge standing nearby and says that the student's death must be confirmed. The man runs up to the hero lying on the court. Fukada admits that it was an unintentional murder and agrees to be punished. The hero's hand is shaking. The judge looks at the guy's body in amazement. Fukada cries out in amazement. Asmar rises to his feet. His eyes gleam menacingly. Fukada fearfully declares that this is simply impossible. He used his family's secret technique, and the boy should not have survived after that. Asmar, whose lower face we can see, declares that he made a serious mistake. The students scream in fear. The girls from the other stands do the same. Asmar thought he was serious, but still underestimated his opponent. Mizuhara looks at what is happening before her eyes with complete calm. In front of us is Shivon. The hero says that it was stupid of him to underestimate the descendant of this representative of Earth magic. Lily looks at the young man fearfully. A blue haze rises around the hero. He declares that from now on he will take Fukada seriously. Fukada looks at his opponent in bewilderment and says that this is simply impossible. Because he used his family's secret technique, he asks how the boy managed to stay in one piece. Asmar walks forward, surrounded by a blue glow. His right eye glows. The guy says that it's time to start taking this enemy seriously. Fukada crouches. He reaches for his sword and promises to destroy the enemy with his secret technique. Asmar frowns at the enemy and thinks that his current body has perfect compatibility with mana. Although his physical indicators are weak, the enemy's previous blow caused him severe damage. We see the young man's hand. He thinks that this fight can't drag on any longer. He needs to finish it quickly. Many magical formations appear around the hero. Now we see a smart rod and a small blue sphere. The hero is going to use the mana core from ancient magic and the magic chain of modern magic. The blue sphere moves to the guy's hand. He concentrates the mana and compresses it. Asmar puts the ball into his chest. He knows that by placing such a clot of mana into the body, you can temporarily improve your physical indicators. A bright glow appears around the young man. Fukada looks at the enemy in amazement. The hero smiles. He thinks that this is the first time he has used this spell and everything went surprisingly smoothly. Asmar puts his hand to his chest. He understands that after all, a fight with a serious opponent is the best environment for development. It makes the brain build new theories that can be immediately tested in practice. We see the leg of one of the opponents. Fukada raises his sword over his head and thinks that Asmar has opened up. The hero looks at the enemy thoughtfully. Fukada prepares to strike. He thinks that at such a moment he cannot be distracted and shouts that this is the end for his enemy. Fukada strikes. We see the hero's right eye. He ends up behind Fukada. The S4 representative looks over his shoulder. He thinks that his opponent is moving too fast and a person cannot move so quickly. Fukada frowns. He thinks that by moving, the hero has entered the death zone, after which he mentally gives the order to his servant to act. A hand appears from under the ground. Two hands grab the hero by the legs. Rock fragments are visible next to the young man's face. Fukada joyfully shouts that Asmar will not be able to move from this spot now. The young man grabs the hand that is holding him. He abruptly pulls out the entity sitting underground. Then he throws it over himself. We see the young man's right eye again. Asmar throws the huge entity. It flies right above the spectators. The three girls scream loudly in horror. The entity pulled out from underground explodes right above the students' heads. A white magical formation is visible next to Asmar. He stretches out his hand forward and tells the enemy that now he will not be able to use either the help of a familiar or the interception of attacks. Fukada looks at the enemy in shock and tries to say something. Asmar goes to the S4 representative and says that it is all over for him. Fukada says in a trembling voice that this is impossible. He is the best in the Japanese Swordsmen's Association, the heir of the Shin House. We see the boy's right eye, continuing to repeat that all this is simply impossible. Fukada, with his arms outstretched, continues to scream like a madman that this simply can't be happening. A flash occurs near his eye. Siwon is sitting at the monitors. It is reported that the action takes place 3,000 years ago. The girl looks around when someone next to her says that she is working tirelessly. Asmar is standing behind Siwon. The girl recognizes him and says hello. The magician approaches the monitors and examines them. He says that Siwon seems to be working on a new magic to reveal her inner potential. The girl confirms his guess, stating that all this will help increase the amount of mana absorbed by the body by 10 times. Asmar says that this is simply amazing. Siwon warns that, however, this magic has a side effect. The one who uses it can fall into a state of uncontrollable aggression. Asmar and Siwon stand opposite each other. The girl says that this magic needs to be improved, but in order to get more accurate data, it is necessary to test the effect on the human body. The boy and the girl look at each other. Asmar says that this will be a dangerous experiment. He asks if Siwon has a candidate for the role of the test subject. She replies that she came up with an idea. Resolutely looking at the interlocutor, she says that she herself is perfect for the role of the test subject, and no one will object to this. Asmar looks intently at the girl. He moves away from her and expresses hope that she will be able to bring this new magic to mind. Siwon puts her hand to her chest and says that these words are a great honor for her. We see a flash near Fukada's head again. The boy looks up in fear and says that someone is coming out of him. Asmar stares at his opponent. The glasses of the S4 representative crack. He screams that the one inside him should not have come out. The glasses fall to the ground. The hero carefully looks at what is happening in front of him. Fukada raises his hands. A crazy expression appears on his face. The boy laughs loudly. The hero has a serious expression on his face. We see his right eye. The guy notices that the amount of mana around Fukada has increased dramatically. Mizuhara smiles. She looks up and says that he finally came. Asmar asks Siwon if this is the result of her magical experiment. A glow appears around Fukada. He looks at the hero predatorily, raising his right hand. The character who took over Fukada's body laughs loudly. He says that he even had to dislocate his shoulder so that the rightful owner would fall. The young man holds a sword in his hands. He says that he hasn't been outside for a long time and now it's time to tear and cut. With a crazy look, this character looks at the hero and says that he will start with this piece of shit. He immediately rushes to attack. Asmar looks at the enemy and thinks that he is very fast, and his magic circuit pulsates from the excessive mana, which enhances his physical abilities. Fukada, or rather the one who is in the body instead of him, strikes with a sword. The hero has to jump back. The mad character screams at Asmar not to even try to escape. He delivers another series of blows, raising stone fragments above himself. Asmar smiles. He thinks that this character has almost reached the power of the original Siwon. We see the girl in question. Tenouji and Fukada are shown with their ancestors. The hero understands that if these new incarnations are pushed to the limit, the power of the past awakens in them. Asmar closes his eyes. He thinks that his opponent is still too far from him. The hero abruptly opens his eyes. The mad Fukada laughs and eggs the hero on. He continues to attack. Piles of stones grow around Asmar. The character who possessed Fukada smiles. He tells the hero that he is at a dead end and now he has nowhere to run. The spectators scream in fear. Someone notices that the fighters have gone outside the ring and it is becoming dangerous. Asmar calmly looks at the enemy. He realizes that the enemy's attacks are not spontaneous. They were all intended to drive him into a corner. Judging by what we see, Asmar is really pinned to the wall. Fukada smiles predatorily. Holding a sword in his hand, the hero realizes that even in a berserk state, he is still able to think tactically. The guy's opponent smiles and says that he has nowhere to run, and he is going to use his last secret technique. Fukada swings his sword and uses the skill Night Demon March. Asmar calmly looks at the enemy. He thinks that this technique is designed to instantly kill. Fukada inflicts 100 different blows at once. We see the hero's right eye. The guy thinks that it is completely unclear what will happen to his current body if at least one blow hits it. Asmar clenches his fists. He puts his hand forward, realizing that the enemy is still very far from him, and he will simply absorb the attack that he carries out. Magic formations appear in the air. The students scream in horror. It is reported that for them everything happened in an instant. Asmar stands with his hand outstretched. It is reported that the Night Demon March was approaching its target, but the hero instantly constructed a magic circle and installed it before the enemy's attack. A bright white sphere appears between the young man's hands. The young man puts powerful energy structures in front of him. Magic formations of various sizes are visible in front of Asmar's hands. It is reported that a huge volumetric magic circle played the main role. Several formations are located next to each other. It is reported that Fukada's attack came into contact with a giant circle similar to a lens. A smartphone hovers above the hero's hand. Now a bright sphere surrounded by white circles is visible above the same limb. It is reported that the lens that Asmar installed contained not only an analysis spell from ancient analyzing magic, but also one of the hero's new developments, and when an object touches the lens, it turns into pure information, which is transmitted directly to the brain. The contents of the hero's skull glow. Countless magical formations are visible underneath. It is reported that the spell of accelerated calculation produces instant analysis. The speed of this process is comparable to the speed of light, and even the speed of the night march of demons cannot be compared with the speed of light. A glowing sphere is visible inside the hero's head. It is reported that huge amounts of information received from the lens are analyzed in the head. We see many mathematical formulas. It is said that it took the hero less than 1/10 of a second to complete this process. Asmar opens his eyes. Blue rectangles are visible around the guy. Fukada continues to go crazy. He screams that he will cut the guy into pieces. Asmar is shown from 3 different angles. He raises his hand. The young man moves his hand very quickly. Horror appears in his opponent's eyes. We see the hero's upper limb again. Asmar, moving his hands lightning fast, looks at the enemy. He feels some kind of impact and cannot understand what it is. Asmar looks at Fukada carefully, thinking that he has just lost his last secret technique, and now all he can do is swing his sword. A distraught Fukada raises his sword to rush into battle, screaming that this is simply impossible. In front of us is a blade. Fukada curses off screen. Asmar stops the sword with 2 fingers. It seems that he is biting the blade with his fingers, like scissors. Fukada does not believe his eyes. Asmar takes a strange pose and throws away the broken blade. Gritting his teeth from the tension, the hero strikes and hits the enemy right in the jaw. Fukada flies back and hits his head on the ground. The broken blade is right in front of the S4 representative's face. The hero, who has taken the form of his ancestor, declares that if his enemy does not surrender, he will try his own sword on his own skin. Fukada's face is distorted with horror. He understands that he could die now. The scabbard of the sword lies among the stone fragments. Fukada says he gives up. He sits helplessly in front of the hero. The students cheer wildly for the winner. Asmar raises his left hand and asks if Fukada now understands his place.